With lawmakers rushing to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act before it expires at the end of the year, a new study finds how much money President Trump's signature tax bill has really saved Americans. Filers earning between $50,000 to $75,000 a year saved more than $4,500. Those who made up to $100,000 saved nearly $6,000, and those who made up to $200,000 saved nearly $10,000. Now, Republicans are still considering how to pay for this. One plan being considered would roll back the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid expansion for the working poor. A group of 12 House Republicans sending a letter to Speaker Mike Johnson warning they will not vote for a reconciliation package that includes steep Medicaid cuts impacting vulnerable populations. Joining me now is North Carolina Congressman and House Financial Services and Budget Committee member Tim Moore. Congressman, good morning to you. So here is what White House Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair told Fox News last night. Watch this.
I think that we are going to have the biggest tax cut package in history, not only renewing the president's 2017 tax cuts, but also adding some additional tax cuts on top of that the president campaigned on that are really great for middle and working class individuals. These are things like no tax on tips, right? No tax on Social Security. So that's what we're really working towards. We also have wide agreement on securing the border, make sure it's funded for the long term to ensure that the great work we've done so far extends past the next few months.
Congressman, your reaction to that, the White House is confident. At the same time, you have many of your colleagues now, Republican colleagues, saying that either cutting the expansion of Medicaid or maybe raising taxes.
Well, I'm confident that we are going to extend the Trump tax cut that otherwise would be expiring this year. We have seen how that really spurred the economy, how it resulted in more money in the pockets of working Americans. You know, you talked about one of the major tax cuts in recent times. We want to keep that going forward. I do have some concerns, though, about this talk of adding additional tax increases. I don't think that's appropriate. I believe, frankly, that we have a spending problem and not a tax problem. And when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, you know, certainly I want to make sure that we have access to health care for those people who need it. But we need to make sure we put in things, for example, like making sure there are work requirements. If someone is able-bodied, they ought to not be getting a handout. Secondly, we really need to make sure that only U.S. citizens are getting any of these benefits. So you can go through and you can make a lot of changes and get rid of all that. And look, think about the billions of dollars already that DOJ has found in waste, fraud, and abuse. And we know that when it comes to HHS, when we know it comes to Medicaid and Medicare, a lot of these programs, there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. We need to make sure those programs are shored up and take care of the people they need to take care of. But we need to get rid of where there's the waste, the fraud, the abuse.
You do, yeah, and certainly there's multiple tracks of how this is all being worked towards. But President Trump and Republican lawmakers are considering raising the corporate tax rate. This came from the White House last week and from some members. They would create a 40% tax bracket for millionaires to pay for all of Trump's desired tax cuts, including no taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security. Listen to Pennsylvania Congressman Dan Muser. This is what he told me on this program last week.
The Tax Cut and Jobs Act under President Trump brought it to 37 just for those just on income levels over $750,000, I think it is. So by bringing it from the 37 as we're redoing the tax plan to perhaps 38.6, right? It would still be 1% less than it was before. Right? So if you were to bring it up at one point, it brings about $15 billion in revenues. So if it did come up to 39, it's almost $25 billion. The president is determined not to have a standard, and this is my view from what I based upon him. I'm not putting words in his mouth. A standard Republican-style budget. What he wants to see is something that is in the interest of all of America, middle-income America, small business.
Would you support Congressman Muser's ideas here?
Well, I certainly have a lot of respect for Dan. He's a great member of Congress, but I don't know that I see things exactly the way that he does on this one. I don't believe that there's a basis that I've seen right now to look at increasing any kinds of income taxes at all. There's just, you know, those tend to stifle the economy. And when you talk about those high income earners, those are the folks that are often creating jobs, that are creating opportunities for others. And so when you go in and you just try to raise taxes on one bracket or another, I just think that's not very helpful. I'll tell you what we did. For example, in North Carolina, the legislature, we came up with a flat tax. Everybody paid the same percentage. And frankly, I think that's the fairest way to do it. You ought to tax it all at the same rate. Do that. That makes the most sense. And I do believe we can find enough waste and fraud and abuse out there that we can deal with the spending side of things and not have to add any more taxes at all to Americans, and in fact pass these tax cuts.
But do you think, Congressman, that there is enough waste, fraud, abuse in Medicaid and in Medicare, but let's stay with Medicaid here because that's the top discussion this morning, to actually still fund what the president has promised? Because even when the White House is saying, look, maybe we do raise the corporate tax rate, maybe we do put a millionaires tax in place. I mean, this is the discussion, I think, because the numbers at this point just simply don't work. Because if you look at the nation's debt overall, it is Medicare, it is Medicaid, and it is Social Security. Medicaid seems to be what they're targeting now. And I realize that's going to hit a lot of Republican states.
Well, I'm just not convinced that we need to raise taxes at all, because studies have shown, and you look at where tax cuts have been put in place, you actually can see increases in revenue. The issue gets to how it gets what's called scored. It's sort of a static model that the CBO looks at. They simply say, well, if you cut taxes, then you're going to have revenues down by that much. What they don't take into account, though, is that you have increased economic activity. You have increased output. You can, in fact, have an increase in your GDP. All of that contributes to actually producing more revenue. We've seen that when states have done this, and we need to do this at the federal level. To me, the easy answer that folks have always looked at is to raise taxes. That's the easy way to do stuff, but it's not the way I want to do it. I think we need to look at going in and trying to find policies to spur the economy, to move things forward, to get this, to get things moving along, and you don't do that by raising taxes.
Well, and that was my point to Congressman Muser on Thursday. I said, Congressman, with all due respect, this sounds like Democratic talking points. But that is where we are right now as these negotiations continue, and Mike Johnson is, we're hoping, leading the way. Congressman Tim Moore, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Have a good day.
All right, you two. We'll be right back.